The bruise on Elena Norton's cheekbone had faded to a sickly yellow by the time she finally walked out of her husband's house with nothing but the clothes on her back and a carpet bag containing 2 dresses, her mother's Bible, and $17 she'd been hiding in the floorboards for 3 years. It was April 1878 in San Andreas, California, and the morning sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street as she made her way to the boarding house, her head held high despite the trembling in her hands and the whispers that followed her like a persistent wasp. She had expected judgment from the good people of this mining town nestled in the Californian foothills, but she had not anticipated the complete and utter isolation that would descend upon her the moment word spread that she had abandoned her matrimonial vows. Mrs. Henderson, who ran the boarding house, had turned her away at the door with a curt dismissal about having no rooms available, though Elena could clearly see the vacancy sign hanging in the window. The general store owner had refused to extend her credit, something he had done freely when she was still Mrs. Gerald Norton, wife of the assayer who worked for the largest mining operation in town. Even Pastor Williams had stopped her on the street to remind her that what God had joined together, no man should put asunder, his voice dripping with disapproval as he pointedly avoided looking at the marks on her arms, where sleeves did not quite cover the fingerprint bruises. Elena had walked the length of San Andreas 3 times that first day, searching for anyone who would rent her a room or offer her work. The sun beat down mercilessly, and her feet ached in boots that had seen better days. She had finally found refuge in the smallest, most dilapidated building at the edge of town, a one-room shack that the livery stable owner agreed to let her use in exchange for mucking out stalls and feeding the horses twice daily. It was honest work, and Elena threw herself into it with a determination born of desperation and a fierce need to prove that she could survive on her own. The other women in town crossed the street to avoid her. Former friends suddenly discovered they had urgent business elsewhere whenever she appeared. Children were called inside when she passed by their houses. Elena had become invisible, or worse, a cautionary tale whispered over tea and needlework about what happened to women who broke their sacred vows and brought shame upon themselves. No one asked why she had left. No one wanted to know about the nights Gerald had come home drunk and violent, about the way he had squeezed every ounce of spirit from her with his fists and his cruel words, about how she had lost a baby at 4 months because of his rage. They only saw a woman who had violated the natural order of things, and they shunned her accordingly. 3 weeks after her escape, Elena was hauling water from the well behind the livery stable when a tall figure on horseback cast a shadow across her path. She looked up, shielding her eyes against the afternoon sun, and found herself staring at a man who sat his horse with the easy grace of someone who had spent more time in the saddle than on solid ground. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of aged whiskey that seemed to take in everything about her situation in a single glance. "Madam," he said, tipping his hat. His voice was low and warm, with a slight drawl that suggested he had come from somewhere south of California. "Name is Ethan Dalton. I am looking for work, and the man at the general store said the livery might need an extra hand. Would you know if that is true?" Elena set down her bucket, acutely aware of how she must look, with her hair escaping its bun and her dress stained with horse manure and hay. "You would need to speak with Mr. Cooper about that. He owns the stable. I just work here." Ethan Dalton dismounted in one fluid motion, and Elena noticed he was tall, well over 6 feet, with broad shoulders and the lean, muscled build of a working cowboy. His clothes were worn but clean, and the gun at his hip looked well maintained. "I appreciate the information. Seems like a nice enough town, though folks do not seem particularly friendly. Asked 3 people for directions before I could get anyone to answer me." Something in his tone made Elena look at him more closely. There was no judgment in his expression, only a mild curiosity and perhaps a hint of understanding. "San Andreas can be a difficult place for outsiders," she said carefully, "and for those who do not fit their notion of respectability. I have noticed that respectability often has less to do with actual character and more to do with following rules that do not always make sense," Ethan said. He studied her face for a moment, and Elena fought the urge to turn away. She was used to people staring at her with disapproval or disgust, but his gaze held something different. "If you do not mind my saying so, you look like you have been carrying the weight of the world on your shoulders. I have found that load gets lighter when someone is willing to help share it." "I am managing fine on my own," Elena said, though the words came out more defensive than she had intended. She picked up her bucket again, sloshing water over the rim. "Mr. Cooper should be in the stable office. Good luck with your employment." She walked away before he could respond, her heart beating faster than it should. It had been so long since anyone had spoken to her with simple human kindness that she found herself almost frightened by it. Kindness was dangerous. It made you hope, and hope was something Elena had learned to live without. Ethan Dalton did get hired by Mr. Cooper, who was indeed in need of another stable hand to help with the increasing number of horses passing through San Andreas as the mining operations expanded. Over the following days, Elena found herself working alongside the quiet cowboy more often than not. He never pried, never asked questions about why a woman like her was living in a shack and doing work that most ladies of the town would consider beneath them. He simply treated her like a fellow human being, with courtesy and respect that felt almost revolutionary in its simplicity. "You have a good hand with horses," Ethan observed one morning as Elena soothed a skittish mare who had thrown a shoe. "Not everyone has the patience for it." "My father raised horses before he died," Elena replied, running her hand along the mare's neck. "I spent most of my childhood in the stables. It was the one thing Gerald, my husband, allowed me to keep doing after we married. He liked being able to tell people his wife had a useful skill." It was the first time she had mentioned Gerald to anyone since leaving, and the name tasted bitter on her tongue. Ethan continued brushing down the gelding he was working on, but she could sense his attention shift toward her. "Was?" he asked quietly. "You said your husband. Past tense." "I left him," Elena said flatly, "a month ago, which you probably already know since the entire town has made sure to inform anyone who will listen what a terrible, sinful woman I am for breaking my marriage vows." "I did hear some talk," Ethan admitted. He set down his brush and turned to face her fully. "Heard a lot of judgment from people who do not know the full story. Seems to me that leaving must have taken more courage than staying, particularly in a place like this where women do not have many options." Elena felt something crack open inside her chest, a tightness she had been carrying for so long, she had forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. Her eyes burned with tears she refused to shed. "No one has said that. Everyone acts like I committed some unforgivable sin. They treat me like I am diseased." "Then everyone is wrong," Ethan said simply. "And they are cowards for not admitting that sometimes a bad situation needs to be left behind, no matter what society says about it." "You do not know anything about my situation," Elena whispered. "I know enough," Ethan said. His voice was gentle but firm. "I know that you flinch when men move too quickly near you. I know you have scars on your arms that you try to hide. I know you have not smiled once in the 3 weeks I have been here. And I know that the way people treat you is shameful and wrong. I do not need to know every detail to understand that you did what you had to do to survive." Elena turned away, focusing intently on the mare's hoof as she fought to compose herself. "Why do you care? You do not know me." "Maybe that is exactly why I can see it clearly," Ethan replied. "I am not tangled up in this town's ideas about what is proper and what is not. I just see a brave woman who made a hard choice and deserves better than what she is getting." They worked in silence for the rest of the morning, but something had shifted between them. Elena found herself stealing glances at Ethan when she thought he was not looking, noticing the careful way he moved around her, always making sure she knew where he was, never crowding her space. He had a quiet strength about him that was nothing like Gerald's bullying aggression. When Ethan lifted heavy saddles or hauled bags of feed, it was simply part of the work, not a display meant to intimidate or impress. That evening, as Elena was preparing to return to her shack, Ethan appeared with a basket covered with a cloth. "Mrs. Chen at the restaurant had extra biscuits and stew," he said. "She gave me too much for one person. Seems wasteful to let it go bad." Elena knew it was a lie. Mrs. Chen ran a tight kitchen and never made more than she could sell. But the smell wafting from the basket made her stomach growl audibly, reminding her that she had been living on little more than bread and beans for weeks. "I cannot pay you for it," she said. "Did I ask for payment?" Ethan set the basket down on the bench outside the stable office. "Seems to me we are both working hard here. No shame in sharing a meal." He walked away before Elena could protest further, heading toward the small room above the stable where Mr. Cooper had given him lodging. Elena stood there for a long moment, staring at the basket, before curiosity and hunger won out over pride. Inside, she found not only biscuits and stew, but also fresh apples, cheese, and a small jar of honey. It was more food than she had seen in weeks, and she had to blink back tears as she carried it to her shack. The pattern repeated over the following days. Ethan would appear with food, always with some excuse about having too much or finding a good deal. He never made a big production of it, never acted like he was doing her a favor that required gratitude. He simply treated it as the most natural thing in the world, two people helping each other get through the day. Elena found herself looking forward to these small kindnesses with an intensity that frightened her. She had promised herself she would never depend on another person again, especially not a man. But Ethan was making that resolve increasingly difficult to maintain. One afternoon, as Elena was leading a horse out to the paddock, she nearly collided with Gerald Norton. Her husband stood blocking the stable entrance, his face flushed with anger or drink or both. He was a solidly built man of 35, with thinning hair and cold blue eyes that had once seemed attractive but now just looked mean. "There you are," Gerald said, his voice loud enough to attract attention from passers-by on the street. "My wife, the woman who abandoned her home and her duties to live like a common laborer. Are you satisfied, Elena? Have you proven whatever point you thought you were making?" Elena's mouth went dry. Her hand tightened on the lead rope, and the horse beside her shifted nervously, sensing her fear. "Leave me alone, Gerald. We have nothing to say to each other." "Nothing to say?" Gerald stepped closer, and Elena instinctively backed up. "You are my wife. You belong to me. This little tantrum of yours has gone on long enough. You will come home now, and we will put this embarrassment behind us." "I am not coming back," Elena said, hating the way her voice shook. "I cannot live that way anymore. I will not." Gerald's face darkened, and he reached out to grab her arm. "You will do as you are told. I have been patient. Let you have your space to come to your senses. But people are starting to talk. It makes me look weak, having a wife who refuses to obey. Now, stop this nonsense and come home." His fingers dug into her arm hard enough to bruise, and Elena cried out. The horse reared, frightened by the sudden violence, and Gerald cursed as he stumbled backward. Before Elena could process what was happening, Ethan appeared seemingly from nowhere, moving between her and Gerald with a deliberate casualness that somehow made him seem more dangerous than if he had drawn his gun. "The lady said no," Ethan said quietly. "Seems pretty clear to me." Gerald stared at him, outrage and confusion warring on his face. "Who in the hell are you? This is between me and my wife. You have no business interfering." "I am making it my business," Ethan replied. His tone was mild, almost conversational, but there was steel underneath it. "She said she is not going with you. That means you need to leave." "I do not take orders from some drifter, cowboy," Gerald spat. "Elena, get over here now. I will not tell you again." Elena stayed where she was, her heart pounding so hard she could hear it in her ears. For so long, she had obeyed Gerald's commands out of fear and exhaustion and a misguided belief that she had no other choice. But standing there with Ethan beside her, she felt something she had not experienced in years, the possibility of saying no and having it matter. "I am not going anywhere with you," she said, and this time her voice was steady. "I left you, Gerald. That part of my life is over." Gerald's face turned an alarming shade of red. "You think you can just walk away from a marriage? The law says otherwise. The church says otherwise. You made vows, Elena." "So did you," Elena shot back, years of suppressed anger suddenly boiling over. "You promised to honor me, to cherish me. Instead, you beat me. You humiliated me. You made every day a nightmare. Those vows died the first time you raised your hand to me." For a moment, Gerald looked genuinely shocked. Elena had never fought back, never challenged him so directly. Then his expression twisted into something ugly. "You ungrateful little..." He lunged forward, but Ethan was faster. He caught Gerald's wrist in an iron grip, stopping him cold. "That is enough," Ethan said, and now there was no pretense of pleasantness in his voice. "You need to leave, now, and do not come back." "You cannot stop me from talking to my own wife," Gerald snarled, trying unsuccessfully to wrench his arm free. "Actually, I can," Ethan said, "because if you try to touch her again, if you threaten her, if you so much as look at her wrong, you will answer to me. And trust me, that is not a conversation you want to have." For a long moment, the two men stared at each other. Elena held her breath, terrified this would escalate into actual violence. But something in Ethan's eyes must have convinced Gerald that he was serious, because he finally stepped back, jerking his arm away. "This is not over," Gerald said, directing the words at Elena. "You are my wife, and I will make sure the whole town knows what kind of woman you really are. Whore, living in sin, taking up with some cowboy the minute you run away from home." "Better a whore than a punching bag," Elena said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Gerald's mouth opened and closed like a fish. Then he spun on his heel and stalked away, leaving Elena shaking so badly she had to lean against the stable wall for support. The horse she had been leading whinnied softly, and she realized she was still clutching the lead rope in a white-knuckle grip. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked. He had stepped back, giving her space, his hands hanging loose at his sides in a deliberately non-threatening posture. "I do not know," Elena admitted. Her whole body felt strange, buzzing with adrenaline and fear and something that might have been triumph. "I have never stood up to him like that before. I always just tried to make myself small, to not provoke him." "You were magnificent," Ethan said, and there was such genuine admiration in his voice that Elena felt heat flood her cheeks. "Took real courage to say what you did." "He is going to make things worse for me now," Elena said, reality crashing back down. "He has friends in this town, influence. I will never find decent work or a proper place to live. He will make sure of it." "Then we will figure something out," Ethan said. "You are not alone in this." Elena looked at him, this man who had known her for barely a month and yet had defended her without hesitation. "Why are you helping me? What do you get out of this?" Ethan was quiet for a moment, his eyes searching her face. "When I was 14, my mother finally left my father after years of him drinking and raging and making our lives hell. She took me and my little sister, and we ran with nothing but what we could carry. For a long time, we had nothing. No money, no home, no one willing to help because she had broken her marriage vows. But eventually, we found people who saw past the scandal to the truth underneath. Those people saved our lives. I guess I am trying to be for you what they were for us." Elena felt tears spill down her cheeks before she could stop them. She had been so alone for so long, had convinced herself that she deserved the isolation because she had failed at being a good wife. But Ethan was looking at her like she mattered, like her suffering was real and important. "Thank you," she whispered. "No thanks needed," Ethan said gently. "Now, let us get this horse settled, and then you should probably stay somewhere other than that shack tonight. Gerald knows where you are, and I do not trust him to leave you alone." "I have nowhere else to go," Elena said helplessly. "There is a spare room in the stable office," Ethan said. "Mr. Cooper uses it to store tack, but it has a door that locks. Not the most comfortable, but safer than being out in the open." That night, Elena slept on a bedroll among saddles and bridles, the smell of leather and horse sweat oddly comforting. She could hear Ethan moving around in the room above, his footsteps solid and reassuring. For the first time since leaving Gerald, she felt something approaching safety. The next morning brought exactly the trouble Elena had predicted. Gerald had indeed been spreading stories, and by noon, the entire town was buzzing with scandalized whispers about Elena Norton living in sin with the new stable hand. The fact that they had not so much as held hands was irrelevant. In the eyes of San Andreas, Elena had confirmed every worst assumption they had made about her. Mrs. Pemberton, one of the wealthiest women in town and a notorious gossip, made a point of stopping by the stable with her daughter in tow. "I needed to see with my own eyes," she declared loudly, her voice carrying across the yard where Elena was pumping water. "To think, a woman who once attended the same church socials as decent folk, now living like some common saloon girl. It is absolutely disgraceful." Her daughter, a pretty blonde girl of perhaps 19, giggled behind her hand. "Mama, should we even be here? What if someone sees us?" "We will not stay long," Mrs. Pemberton said. "I just wanted to make sure the rumors were true. And here is the proof, bold as brass. Elena Norton, you should be ashamed of yourself." Elena felt her face burn, but before she could respond, Ethan appeared from the stable. "Is there something you ladies need? If not, you are blocking the entrance and we have work to do." Mrs. Pemberton's eyes widened with indignation. "Well, I never. The nerve of you speaking to me in such a tone." "The nerve of me?" Ethan said mildly. "Madam, you came here specifically to insult Miss Norton. Seems to me that is poor manners no matter how you dress it up. Now, unless you need your horse tended, I'm going to have to ask you to move along." "Miss Norton?" Mrs. Pemberton's voice went shrill. "She is Mrs. Norton, a married woman carrying on in the most scandalous fashion. How dare you defend such behavior? How dare I defend someone being treated poorly for making a difficult choice?" Ethan said. His voice remained calm, but there was an edge to it that made Mrs. Pemberton take a step back. "Pretty easily, actually. Now, good day, madam." He turned his back on her, a calculated insult, and walked over to Elena. "Ignore them," he said quietly. "Small minds cannot comprehend courage." Mrs. Pemberton huffed and flounced away, her daughter scurrying after her. Elena watched them go, torn between gratitude for Ethan's defense and despair at how thoroughly her reputation had been destroyed. "You should not have done that," she said. "Mrs. Pemberton will make sure no one in town speaks to you either now." "I have been through worse," Ethan said with a shrug. "Besides, I do not particularly care what people like her think of me." But as the days passed, the consequences of their association became impossible to ignore. Mr. Cooper, who had been a relatively fair employer, pulled Ethan aside and suggested that perhaps it would be better if Elena found work elsewhere. The few customers who had been willing to use the stable were taking their business to the other side of town. Children threw rocks at Elena when she walked to the general store, egged on by parents who saw her as a symbol of everything that could go wrong when women stepped out of their proper place. Through it all, Ethan remained steadfast. He helped Elena find odd jobs that could be done away from prying eyes, washing laundry for the Chinese workers who lived on the outskirts of town, mending tack and equipment for prospectors who cared more about quality work than scandal. He shared his meals with her without comment, and on the nights when the weight of everything became too much and Elena broke down crying, he sat nearby and simply listened. "I have ruined your life," Elena said one evening as they sat outside the stable watching the sun set over the foothills. "You came here looking for a fresh start, and instead you got tangled up in my mess." "You did not ruin anything," Ethan said firmly. "I made my own choices, still do." "But why?" Elena turned to face him, searching his face in the fading light. "Why would you choose this? Choose me? We barely know each other." Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon where the sky was turning shades of orange and purple. "Can I tell you something? Something I have not told many people?" "Of course," Elena said softly. "My mother died 3 years after we left my father," Ethan said. "She got sick, and we did not have money for a doctor. My sister and I, we watched her fade away, and there was nothing we could do about it. Before she died, she made me promise something. She said, 'Ethan, do not let the world make you hard. Do not let fear keep you from helping people who need it. Be the kind of man who stands up when it matters, even if it costs you something.'" He paused, his throat working. "So, that is what I try to do. I try to be the person she believed I could be." Elena felt her heart crack open in a way that was both painful and necessary. "She raised a good son," she whispered. "I hope so," Ethan said. He turned to look at her, and in his eyes, Elena saw something that made her breath catch. It was not pity or obligation. It was something warmer, deeper, something that felt like the beginning of possibilities she had thought were closed to her forever. "Elena, I want you to know that I am not helping you because I feel sorry for you, or because I think you owe me anything. I am helping you because I want to. Because when I look at you, I see someone worth knowing, someone worth standing beside." "Ethan," Elena started, but her voice failed her. She was terrified of what she was feeling, this fragile hope blooming in her chest like wildflowers after rain. Gerald had taught her that love was control, that devotion meant submission. But what she felt when she looked at Ethan was nothing like that. It was freedom and safety and the possibility of being herself without fear. "You do not have to say anything," Ethan said gently. "I just wanted you to know. No pressure, no expectations, just the truth." That night, lying on her bedroll in the stable office, Elena thought about what Ethan had said. For the first time since leaving Gerald, she let herself imagine a future that was not just about survival. She imagined waking up without fear, imagined laughter and conversation, and the simple comfort of being seen and valued for who she was. She imagined building something new, not because she needed to prove anything to the people of San Andreas, but because she wanted to live rather than merely exist. The next morning brought another confrontation, but this time, Elena was ready for it. Gerald appeared at the stable with two other men, his face set in grim determination. "I have come to take what is mine," he announced. "This situation has gone on long enough. Elena, gather your things. You are coming home." "No," Elena said. She stood up from where she had been repairing a bridle, her hands steady despite the fear churning in her stomach. "I told you before, Gerald, I am not your property and I am not going back." "You do not have a choice," Gerald said. He gestured to the men flanking him. "These gentlemen are here as witnesses. The law is on my side. A wife belongs with her husband. That is the way of things." "The law might be on your side," Elena said, "but morality is not. Neither is decency or human kindness or any of the things you claim to represent." One of the men with Gerald shifted uncomfortably. He was younger, maybe in his early 20s, and he looked uncertain about his role in this confrontation. The other man, however, was older and harder, with the expression of someone who enjoyed exerting power over those weaker than himself. "Morality?" Gerald laughed harshly. "You dare speak to me of morality? You who abandoned your sacred vows to whore yourself to some drifting cowboy?" "I am not whoring myself to anyone," Elena said, her voice rising with anger. "I am working for my living, supporting myself, harming no one. But you cannot stand that, can you? You cannot stand that I might exist without you, that I might be happy without you. That is what this is really about, Gerald. Not vows, not morality. Control. You want to control me, and you are angry that you cannot anymore." Gerald's face turned purple with rage. "You are my wife. You will do as I say." "I was your wife," Elena corrected. "But that ended the day I walked out of your house. You can drag me back by force, you can lock me up, you can beat me until I cannot stand, but you will never have my willing obedience again. I would rather die than go back to living the way I did." The younger man spoke up suddenly. "Mr. Norton, maybe we should—" "Shut up, Tommy," Gerald snapped. "You are here to witness, not to give opinions." Ethan emerged from the stable, wiping his hands on a rag. He took in the scene with a single glance, his expression hardening. "Problem here? Stay out of this," Gerald warned. "This is between me and my wife." "That is where you are wrong," Ethan said. He moved to stand beside Elena, a solid presence that radiated quiet strength. "This involves Elena, and she has made her position clear. You need to respect that and leave." The older man with Gerald sneered. "Big talk from a cowboy nobody. You got no authority here. Mr. Norton has the law on his side. He has every right to take his wife home." "Does he?" Ethan said mildly. "Interesting interpretation of the law. From what I understand, forcing someone to go somewhere against their will is called kidnapping, and assault is assault, whether it is your wife or a stranger. So, maybe the law is not as clear-cut as you think." Mr. Cooper chose that moment to appear from the stable office, clearly drawn by the commotion. He looked unhappy about the situation, but to his credit, he did not immediately side with Gerald. "What is going on here? This is disrupting my business." "I am retrieving my wife," Gerald said. "These two have been interfering, but I am sure you understand the situation. As a respectable business owner, you cannot condone this kind of scandalous behavior." Mr. Cooper looked at Elena, then at Ethan, then back at Gerald. For a long moment, he was silent. Then he said, "From what I have seen, Miss Norton has been working hard and causing no trouble. The same goes for Ethan. Can I say the same about you, Mr. Norton? Because it seems to me you are the one causing a disturbance." Gerald looked stunned. "You are taking her side, a woman who abandoned her husband?" "I am taking the side of peace and order," Mr. Cooper said firmly, "which means I am asking you to leave my property. Whatever issues you have with Miss Norton, they need to be worked out through proper channels, not by showing up here making threats." "Proper channels?" Gerald sputtered. "I am telling you she is my wife." "And I am telling you to leave," Mr. Cooper said. "Now, before I call the sheriff and let him sort this out." For a moment, Elena thought Gerald might actually attack someone. His fists were clenched, his whole body vibrating with fury. But the mention of the sheriff seemed to penetrate his rage. The law might technically be on his side, but causing a public brawl would not help his cause. With a final venomous look at Elena, he turned and stalked away, the two men trailing behind him, The younger one, Tommy, glanced back once with an expression that might have been apology, but he kept walking. Elena felt her knees go weak with relief. She had expected Mr. Cooper to side with Gerald, to tell her to leave and take her problems elsewhere. Instead, he had defended her, even if only to protect his business. "Thank you," she said to him. "I know this causes you trouble." "Maybe," Mr. Cooper said. He was a grizzled man in his 50s, weathered by years of hard work. "But I got daughters of my own. Would not want to see them trapped in a bad situation just because society says they ought to be. You do good work, Miss Norton. That is what matters to me." It was the first time anyone in San Andreas besides Ethan had acknowledged her as a person rather than a scandal, and Elena felt tears prick her eyes. "I will not let you down," she promised. "I know you will not," Mr. Cooper said. He nodded at Ethan. "You both get back to work. I have got some errands to run, but I will be back before evening." After he left, Elena turned to Ethan. "That was too close. Gerald is not going to give up." "Probably not," Ethan agreed. "But he is running out of options. He cannot force you physically without breaking the law himself, and public opinion is starting to shift, even if it is just a little. Mr. Cooper standing up for you means something. Others might follow." "Or they might not," Elena said wearily. "I am so tired of fighting, Ethan. Some days I wonder if it would not be easier to just give up, to go back and endure it." Ethan moved closer, close enough that Elena could feel the warmth radiating from him. "Hey," he said softly, "look at me." When she did, his eyes were fierce with conviction. "You have already done the hardest part. You left. You chose yourself when everything and everyone was telling you not to. Do not let exhaustion steal that victory from you now. You deserve a life that is more than just endurance. You deserve happiness, Elena. Please believe that." "I want to," Elena whispered. "When I am with you, I almost can." Something shifted in Ethan's expression, a softening that made him look younger and more vulnerable. "Then stay with me. Not because you need protection or because you have nowhere else to go. Stay because you want to. Because this," he gestured between them, "whatever this is, it is worth exploring." Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. She had been so carefully not thinking about the attraction that had been building between them, the way her stomach flipped when he smiled, the way she found excuses to be near him. It felt too soon, too dangerous. She was still married in the eyes of the law, still broken in too many ways. "Ethan, I am not free. Not really. Gerald is still my husband, and people already think the worst. If I let myself care for you the way I am starting to, it will only make things more complicated." "Life is complicated," Ethan said. "That does not mean we should avoid the good parts. I am not asking you to make any grand declarations or commitments. I am just asking you to be honest about what you feel. Because I can see it in your eyes when you look at me, Elena. You feel it too." She could not deny it. The truth was there between them, fragile and terrifying and real. "I am afraid," she admitted. "Gerald taught me that love means pain. I know you are not him, I know that, but the fear is still there." "Of course it is," Ethan said. "That makes sense. He hurt you in ways that are going to take time to heal. I am not asking you to be unafraid. I am just asking you to give this a chance despite the fear. Let me show you that love does not have to be what Gerald made it. It can be gentle. It can be partnership. It can be freedom instead of a cage." Elena felt something inside her shift, like ice breaking apart after a long winter. "You make it sound so simple." "It is simple," Ethan said. "Not easy, but simple. We care about each other. We treat each other with respect and kindness. We build something together, one day at a time. That is all relationships are supposed to be." Elena reached out tentatively, and Ethan met her halfway, his large, calloused hand enfolding hers with surprising gentleness. The touch sent warmth flooding through her, not the burning heat of fear and adrenaline she had learned to associate with physical contact, but something softer and sweeter. Safety. Connection. The promise of something better. "One day at a time," she repeated. "I think I can do that." Ethan's smile was like sunrise breaking through clouds. "Then that is what we will do." Over the following weeks, Elena and Ethan settled into a rhythm that felt almost normal. They worked side by side at the stable, their conversation flowing easily from practical matters to deeper topics. Ethan told her about his childhood in Texas, about the ranch his father had run into the ground with drink and violence, about the long journey west with his mother and sister after they fled. Elena shared her own history, the way she had been courted by Gerald when she was just 19 and too naive to see the warning signs, the gradual erosion of her spirit as his true nature revealed itself. "I thought I could fix him," she said one evening, as they sat outside watching the stars emerge. "I thought if I was just a better wife, more obedient, more patient, he would become the man he pretended to be when we were courting. It took me years to understand that the problem was never me. He did not want a partner, he wanted a possession." "That is a hard realization," Ethan said, "but an important one. You are not responsible for his choices or his cruelty. That is all on him." "Intellectually, I know that," Elena said, "but there is still a part of me that wonders if I gave up too easily. Everyone says marriage is hard work, that you are supposed to push through the difficult times." "There is a difference between hard work and abuse," Ethan said firmly. "Hard work is two people who care about each other navigating challenges together. Abuse is one person exerting power and control over another. You did not give up too easily. You survived. That took strength most people cannot imagine." Elena leaned against the wall, feeling the rough wood against her back. "How did you get so wise?" Ethan laughed, the sound warm and genuine. "I am not wise. I just watched my mother live through the same thing and learn from her experience. She used to tell me that the bravest thing she ever did was get in that wagon with us kids and drive away from the only life she had known. She said fear almost stopped her 100 times, but she kept going because she wanted us to know that we did not have to accept cruelty as normal." "She sounds like an extraordinary woman," Elena said. "She was," Ethan said softly. "I wish you could have met her. I think you two would have understood each other." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the night air cool and clean after the heat of the day. Elena found herself acutely aware of Ethan's presence beside her, the solid warmth of him, the easy confidence with which he inhabited space. It was so different from Gerald, who had always seemed to take up more room than he needed, pushing into her boundaries until she forgot she was allowed to have any. "Can I ask you something?" Elena said finally. "Anything," Ethan replied. "Have you ever been in love? Before, I mean?" Ethan considered the question. "Once, or I thought I was. There was a girl back in Texas, daughter of the rancher my father worked for before everything fell apart. We were both young, maybe 17 or 18. Thought we would get married someday. But after we left, after my mother died, I wrote to her. She never answered. I think her father might have kept my letters from reaching her, or maybe she just decided she did not want to be associated with the son of a drunk. Either way, it did not work out." "I am sorry," Elena said. "That must have hurt." "It did for a while," Ethan admitted. "But looking back, I am not sure it was really love. More like the idea of love, something to hold on to when everything else was falling apart. Real love, the kind that matters, that should be built on actually knowing someone, seeing them clearly, flaws and all, and choosing them anyway." "Is that what you are doing with me?" Elena asked quietly. "Choosing me despite my flaws?" Ethan turned to look at her, his expression serious. "Elena, I am not choosing you despite anything. I am choosing you because of who you are, your strength, your courage, the way you keep going even when the world tells you not to, the way you gentle nervous horses and make me laugh with your dry observations about the ridiculous people in this town. You are not flawed, you are human, and you are extraordinary." Elena felt her breath catch. No one had ever spoken to her that way, with such complete sincerity and admiration. Gerald's version of love had been possessive and conditional, something she had to earn through perfect obedience. But Ethan was offering something entirely different, a love based on seeing her clearly and valuing what he saw. "I do not know how to do this," she whispered, "how to be with someone who actually cares about my feelings and my thoughts. It is so foreign to me." "Then we will figure it out together," Ethan said. He reached out slowly, giving her plenty of time to pull away, and gently tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "We will make mistakes, probably both of us. But we will be honest with each other, and we will keep trying. That is all anyone can do." Elena closed her eyes, leaning into his touch. It was the most intimate gesture they had shared, and it felt like a revelation. Touch did not have to hurt. It did not have to take. It could give, could comfort, could connect. "I am falling in love with you," she said, the words escaping before she could stop them. "I know I should not be. I know it is too soon and too complicated, but I am." "Elena," Ethan breathed. His hand cupped her cheek, thumb brushing away tears she had not realized were falling. "I am already there, have been for weeks, just been waiting for you to catch up." She opened her eyes and found him looking at her with such tenderness that her heart felt like it might burst. "What do we do now?" "Now," Ethan said, leaning closer. "If you want me to, I am going to kiss you, but only if you want me to. This is your choice, Elena. Always." The fact that he asked, that he gave her the power to decide, made all the difference. Elena nodded, and then Ethan's lips were on hers, gentle and questioning. It was nothing like the brutal, claiming kisses Gerald had forced on her. This was soft and sweet, a conversation rather than a conquest. Elena felt herself melt into it, her hand coming up to rest against Ethan's chest, where she could feel his heart beating strong and steady. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing a little harder, Ethan rested his forehead against hers. "Okay?" he asked. "More than okay," Elena said. She felt light, almost giddy, as if something heavy had lifted from her shoulders. That was perfect. They stayed there for a long time, wrapped in each other's presence, talking quietly about everything and nothing. Elena told him about her dreams, the ones she had buried when she married Gerald, about wanting to breed horses and run a stable of her own someday. Ethan shared his hope of settling down somewhere, putting down real roots instead of constantly drifting. They talked about practical things too, acknowledging that their situation was far from ideal. "Eventually, I am going to need to divorce Gerald," Elena said. "I do not know how, or if it is even possible, but I cannot stay married to him forever." "We will find a way," Ethan promised. "Maybe not right away, but we will figure it out. There are lawyers who handle these things. It might take time and money we do not have yet, but we will get there." "You are so confident," Elena said with a small smile. "How do you know it will work out?" "Because I have seen you overcome impossible odds already," Ethan said. "If you can survive what you have survived, a legal proceeding is nothing. We just need to be patient and strategic." The next few months were the happiest of Elena's life, despite the continued hostility from most of San Andreas. She and Ethan were inseparable, working together during the day and spending their evenings planning for a future that felt increasingly real. Mr. Cooper, bless him, continued to support them, even hiring Elena officially when another stable hand quit. The pay was modest but steady, and combined with Ethan's wages, they began saving toward their goals. Not everyone in town was cruel. Elena discovered there were other women who had suffered in silence, who looked at her with a mix of fear and admiration. One day, a woman named Mary approached her at the well, glancing around nervously before speaking. "I just wanted to say," Mary whispered, "that I think you are brave. My husband, he has not ever hit me, but he is not kind either. Seeing you stand up for yourself, it makes me think maybe I do not have to accept things the way they are." Elena felt a rush of emotion. "You deserve kindness, Mary. You deserve to be treated with respect. If you ever need help, please come find me." Mary nodded quickly and hurried away, but Elena knew the seed had been planted. Her choice to leave Gerald was not just about her own freedom. It was showing other women that escape was possible, that they did not have to endure cruelty in the name of duty. Gerald, for his part, made several more attempts to force Elena's return. He tried legal channels, but the circuit judge who finally heard the case was a practical man more interested in peace than in enforcing marital property rights. When Gerald could not produce evidence that Elena had stolen from him or committed any actual crime, the judge basically told him to leave her alone. It was not a divorce, not officially, but it gave Elena breathing room. Enraged, Gerald spread increasingly vicious rumors, claiming Elena was running a house of ill repute, that she was corrupting the youth of San Andreas with her sinful example. Most people ignored him by this point. His drinking had intensified, and he was becoming unreliable in his work. The mining company eventually let him go, which only made him angrier. One night, several months after Elena had left him, Gerald showed up at the stable, drunk and belligerent. Elena and Ethan were working late, repairing a broken stall door, when they heard him shouting outside. "Elena, I know you are in there. Come out here and face me, you coward." Ethan immediately positioned himself between Elena and the door. "Stay behind me," he said quietly. "Ethan, he is drunk," Elena said, her heart pounding. "He is dangerous when he is like this." "I know," Ethan said. "That is why you were staying back. I will handle this." He stepped outside, and Elena followed despite his instructions, unwilling to let him face Gerald alone. Her husband was swaying in the yard, a bottle in one hand. He looked terrible, his clothes dirty and his face flushed. "There is my whore of a wife," Gerald slurred when he saw Elena. "And her fancy cowboy. You think you are better than me? You think you can just throw me away like garbage?" "Gerald, go home," Elena said, trying to keep her voice calm. "You are drunk. We can talk when you are sober." "Talk?" Gerald laughed bitterly. "You do not want to talk. You just want to keep playing house with this drifter, pretending you are respectable. But everyone knows what you are. Everyone knows." "That is enough," Ethan said sharply. "You need to leave now." "Make me," Gerald said. He took a step forward, raising the bottle like a weapon. What happened next seemed to occur in slow motion. Gerald swung the bottle at Ethan, who dodged easily. Off balance, Gerald stumbled forward, and Ethan caught him, wrestling the bottle away. Gerald fought back, throwing wild punches, but he was too drunk to be effective. Within moments, Ethan had him pinned against the stable wall, one arm twisted behind his back. "Stop," Ethan said firmly. "Just stop. This is over, Gerald. You have lost. Accept it and move on with your life." "I will never accept it," Gerald spat. "She is mine. She will always be mine." "No," Elena said, stepping forward. "I was never yours, Gerald. I was a person you married, a person you hurt. But I am not your property, and I never will be again. You need to let me go." Gerald twisted his head to look at her, and Elena saw something break in his expression. For just a moment, he looked lost and pathetic rather than threatening. "I do not know how to do that," he said, and his voice was almost a sob. "You were all I had." "That is not my responsibility," Elena said, though she felt a twinge of pity despite everything. "You made your choices, Gerald. You chose violence and control instead of love. The consequences of that are yours to bear, not mine." Ethan released Gerald, who slumped against the wall. "Go home," Ethan said quietly. "Sleep it off. Tomorrow, start figuring out how to build a life that does not involve Elena. It is possible if you try." Gerald looked between them, his face a mask of misery and rage and confusion. Then he turned and stumbled away into the darkness, the bottle forgotten in the dirt. Elena let out a shaky breath. "Do you think he will finally leave us alone?" "I do not know," Ethan said honestly. "But I think something changed tonight. He is starting to realize he cannot win this. And that might be the first step toward him accepting it." He was right. After that night, Gerald stopped his public campaigns against Elena. He left San Andreas a few weeks later, taking a job at a mine in Nevada, according to the rumors. Elena heard nothing from him directly, but his departure felt like the closing of a chapter. She was finally, truly free. Winter came to the foothills of California, bringing cold rain and crisp mornings. Elena and Ethan continued saving every penny they could, their plans for the future becoming more concrete. They found a piece of land outside of town, 5 acres with a small house and room for a stable. The owner, an older man named Mr. Henley, who was moving to live with his daughter, agreed to sell it to them for a fair price with payments over time. "It is not much," Mr. Henley said, as he showed them the property. "But the house is solid and the land is good. You will have to work hard to make something of it, but I think you two are up to the challenge." Elena walked through the small house with wonder, imagining curtains on the windows and furniture they would build themselves. It was tiny compared to the house she had shared with Gerald, but it felt like a palace because it would be truly hers, a home built on freedom and love rather than obligation and fear. "We will take it," Elena said, looking at Ethan for confirmation. When he nodded, grinning, she felt joy bubble up inside her. "We will take it." They moved in on a cold January day in 1879, almost 9 months after Elena had first walked away from Gerald. The house was drafty and needed repairs, but it was theirs. That first night, sitting by the fire they had built in the hearth, Elena felt peace settle over her like a warm blanket. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually did it." Ethan pulled her close. and she rested her head on his shoulder. "You did it," he corrected. "You were the one who had the courage to leave, to stand up for yourself. I just helped along the way." "You did more than help," Elena said. She tilted her head back to look at him. "You gave me hope when I had none. You showed me that not all men are like Gerald, that love can be kind. You saved my life, Ethan." "No," Ethan said, cupping her face in his hands. "You saved your own life. I just had the privilege of being there to witness it, and I plan to keep witnessing it, every day for the rest of our lives, if you will have me." Elena's breath caught. "Is that a proposal?" "Not yet," Ethan said with a gentle smile. "You are still technically married, and I will not put you in a position that could cause legal problems. But once that is resolved, once you are truly free, I am going to ask you properly, and I hope you will say yes." "I will," Elena promised. "Whenever you ask, the answer will be yes." They kissed then, long and deep, and Elena marveled at how natural it felt, how right. This was what partnership was supposed to be, two people choosing each other freely, supporting each other, building something together, not one person dominating the other, but genuine equality and respect. As winter gave way to spring, Elena and Ethan worked tirelessly to build their new life. They repaired the fences and built stalls in the old barn. Elena began breeding horses, using the knowledge her father had taught her years ago. Word spread that she had a good eye for quality animals, and slowly, customers started coming to them. Some were people who had always been kind, others were folks from surrounding towns who had not heard the scandals, and a few were people from San Andreas who had come to respect Elena's resilience and skill. Mrs. Pemberton showed up one day, her daughter Caroline in tow. Elena braced herself for another confrontation, but the older woman looked uncharacteristically uncertain. "Miss Norton," Mrs. Pemberton said stiffly, "I came to apologize. My behavior toward you was unconscionable. I judged you without knowing your circumstances, and I said cruel things. I am sorry." Elena stared at her in shock. "What brought this on?" Mrs. Pemberton's face flushed. "I learned some things about my own son's marriage that I will not go into detail about, but it made me realize that sometimes things are not what they appear from the outside. And Caroline here convinced me that I owed you an apology. She has been quite insistent on the matter." Caroline, who had been silent during her mother's speech, stepped forward. "I was wrong too, Miss Norton. I laughed at you when I should have shown compassion. I am sorry. If there is anything I can do to make amends, I would like to try." Elena felt a lump form in her throat. She had not expected forgiveness from the people of San Andreas, had resigned herself to being an outcast forever. But here was Mrs. Pemberton, proud and proper, offering an apology. "Thank you," Elena said quietly. "That means more than you know." Over time, other apologies trickled in. Not from everyone. There were still people who would never forgive Elena for leaving her husband, but enough that she no longer felt completely isolated. She began attending church again, sitting in the back where Pastor Williams could not easily see her, as some people still whispered, but others nodded at her or even smiled. 2 years after leaving Gerald, Elena received word that he had died in a mining accident in Nevada. The news came via a letter from a lawyer, informing her that as his widow, she was entitled to his minimal possessions. Elena felt a complex swirl of emotions, grief for the young man she had once believed Gerald to be, relief that the threat he represented was finally gone, and sadness for a life wasted on anger and violence. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked when she told him. "I think so," Elena said slowly. "It is strange. I do not mourn him exactly, but I mourn what could have been if he had been different. Does that make sense?" "Perfect sense," Ethan said. "You can grieve the loss of potential while still acknowledging the reality of what was. Those things are not mutually exclusive." With Gerald's death, Elena was finally, legally free. The relief was overwhelming. She no longer had to look over her shoulder or worry about him appearing unexpectedly. She could truly move forward without the weight of the past dragging her down. 3 months later, on a warm summer evening, Ethan took Elena to the small grove of oak trees on their property. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, and wildflowers bloomed all around them. "Elena Norton," Ethan said, taking both her hands in his, "I have been waiting 2 years to ask you this. Will you marry me? Will you be my wife, my partner, my equal in all things? Will you build this life with me, not because you have to, but because you want to?" Elena felt tears stream down her face, but they were tears of joy. "Yes," she said, her voice breaking. "Yes, absolutely yes." Ethan pulled a simple gold band from his pocket, clearly worn but polished to a shine. "This was my mother's," he said. "It is not fancy, but it is perfect," Elena interrupted. She held out her hand, and Ethan slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit as if it had been made for her. They were married a month later by a judge in a neighboring town, with Mr. Cooper and his wife standing as witnesses. It was a simple ceremony, nothing like the elaborate wedding Elena had endured with Gerald, but it was real and meaningful and right. When the judge pronounced them husband and wife, Elena felt a sense of rightness settle deep in her bones. The years that followed were not without challenges. Building a successful horse breeding operation took hard work and long hours. There were droughts that made feed expensive, and winters that tested their resolve. But through it all, Elena and Ethan faced each challenge as partners, making decisions together, supporting each other through difficulties. Their first child, a son they named Samuel after Ethan's maternal grandfather, was born in the spring of 1882. Elena had been terrified throughout the pregnancy, haunted by memories of the baby she had lost during her marriage to Gerald. But this pregnancy was different. She was healthy and well-fed and surrounded by love. When Samuel came into the world squalling and healthy, Elena wept with relief and joy. Ethan was a devoted father, getting up with the baby at night and changing diapers without complaint. He played with Samuel for hours, building things and telling stories. Watching them together, Elena often marveled at how different this family was from the one she had once imagined having with Gerald. 2 years later, they welcomed a daughter, Grace, and then another son, Matthew, 2 years after that. The house that had once seemed spacious grew crowded and noisy and filled with laughter. Elena's horse breeding operation flourished, and they earned a reputation for quality animals and fair dealing that brought customers from across California. One evening, when the children were in bed and Elena and Ethan sat on the porch watching the stars, Elena reflected on how much her life had changed. "Do you remember that first day we met?" she asked. "When you asked me about work at the stable?" "Of course," Ethan said. "You looked like you were carrying the weight of the world. I wanted to help, even though I did not know you yet." "You said something to me a few weeks later," Elena continued. "You said that leaving took more courage than staying. I have thought about that so many times over the years. It was exactly what I needed to hear, exactly when I needed to hear it. It was true then, and it is true now," Ethan said. He took her hand, his thumb tracing the gold band she wore. "You are the bravest person I know, Elena. Everything we have, everything we built, it started with your courage." "Our courage," Elena corrected. "You stood by me when no one else would. You believed in me when I did not believe in myself. We did this together." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the night air cool and clean. Elena thought about the young woman she had been, broken and afraid, convinced she was worthless because that was what Gerald had taught her to believe. She thought about the long journey from that place to here, to this porch, this family, this life built on mutual respect and genuine love. "I am happy," she said softly, almost surprised by the realization. "For the first time in my adult life, I am genuinely, completely happy." Ethan squeezed her hand. "Good. You deserve it. You deserve every good thing this life has to offer." As the years passed, Elena became something of a legend in San Andreas and the surrounding areas. Women who were struggling in difficult marriages would sometimes come to her, asking for advice or simply for someone who would listen without judgment. Elena always welcomed them, offering what help she could, whether it was a place to stay, connections to lawyers, or simply the knowledge that leaving was possible. She and Ethan expanded their property, buying adjacent land when it became available. Their children grew up surrounded by horses and wide-open spaces, learning the value of hard work and the importance of treating people with dignity. Samuel inherited his mother's gift with horses and eventually took over the breeding operation. Grace became a teacher, passionate about educating girls and giving them opportunities. Matthew followed his father's footsteps and became a skilled horseman, eventually starting his own ranch in Oregon. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised Elena with a trip to San Francisco. They had never taken a real vacation, always too busy with work and children. But now, with the kids grown, or nearly so, they could finally afford such luxury. Standing on the deck of the ferry, watching the bay shimmer in the sunlight, Elena thought about how far she had come. From the frightened woman who had walked out of an abusive marriage with nothing, to this confident person who had built a successful business and raised a family. It seemed almost impossible, like a story rather than a life she had actually lived. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan asked, coming to stand beside her. "Everything," Elena said. "The past, the present, the future. How lucky I am." "Lucky?" Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Elena, luck had nothing to do with it. You made choices, brave choices, and you worked harder than anyone I know. That is not luck, that is strength." "Maybe," Elena allowed, "but I was also lucky enough to meet you at exactly the right moment. If you had not been there, if you had not stood by me and believed in me, I do not know if I could have made it." "You would have," Ethan said with certainty. "Maybe it would have taken longer, maybe the path would have been different, but you would have survived. That is who you are, a survivor, a fighter." Elena leaned against him, feeling his solid warmth. "I do not want to just survive anymore. I want to live fully, to experience everything, to keep building and growing. Is that selfish?" "Not even a little," Ethan said. "That is exactly what life is supposed to be, not just getting through the days, but actually living them, embracing joy, accepting challenges, being present for all of it." They spent a week in San Francisco, going to restaurants and theaters, walking through parks, simply enjoying each other's company without the constant demands of the ranch. It was glorious and refreshing, and when they returned home, Elena felt renewed. The children were waiting for them, the house full of noise and chaos in the best possible way. Samuel had been managing things in their absence and had stories about a difficult mare who had finally allowed him to trim her hooves. Grace had started planning her first teaching position in town. Matthew was full of plans for his own ranch, asking his father endless questions about land and business. Elena stood in the doorway of the house, watching her family interact, and felt profound gratitude. This was what she had dreamed of during those dark days with Gerald, though she had not been able to articulate it then. Not perfection, but connection. Not control, but partnership. Not survival, but genuine, messy, complicated love. As she grew older, Elena became active in efforts to help women in difficult situations. She worked with lawyers to understand divorce laws, helped establish a small fund to assist women who needed to leave dangerous marriages, and spoke publicly about her own experiences. It was controversial work. Many people still believed that marriage was sacred regardless of circumstances, that women who left their husbands were morally suspect. But Elena no longer cared about the opinions of people who valued rules over human well-being. She had lived through the consequences of staying in a marriage that was killing her spirit, and she had experienced the freedom that came from choosing her own path. If sharing her story could help even one woman find the courage to save herself, it was worth any amount of judgment. Pastor Williams, now quite elderly, stopped her after church one Sunday. "Mrs. Dalton," he said, his voice tremulous with age, "I owe you an apology. When you left your first husband, I thought you were making a terrible mistake. I believed you were breaking sacred vows, but I have seen how your life has unfolded, the good you have done, the family you have built. I was wrong. Sometimes leaving is not abandonment. Sometimes it is salvation." Elena felt tears prick her eyes. She had long since forgiven the people who had judged her, but hearing this acknowledgement from a man who represented the institution that had caused her so much pain meant something. "Thank you for saying that," she said. "It must not have been easy." "It was not," the pastor admitted. "Pride is a difficult thing to swallow. But I have learned that God's grace is bigger than our human rules and judgments. I should have offered you compassion when you needed it most. I am sorry I failed you in that." "You are offering it now," Elena said gently. "That matters." As Elena entered her 50s and then her 60s, she and Ethan settled into a comfortable rhythm. The ranch practically ran itself with Samuel at the helm, and they were able to spend more time simply enjoying each other's company. They took long rides through the hills, revisited San Francisco, and eventually traveled as far as Denver and Salt Lake City. Grandchildren arrived, filling the ranch with noise and laughter once again. Elena delighted in watching Ethan teach them to ride, in reading them stories, in passing on the knowledge of horses that had been passed to her from her own father. She made sure each grandchild knew the story of how she and Ethan met, how courage and kindness had built everything they now enjoyed. On a warm spring evening in 1910, Elena and Ethan sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. They were both in their 70s now, their hair white, their bodies bearing the marks of years of hard work, but their hands were still entwined, their connection as strong as ever. "Do you have any regrets?" Elena asked, a question that had been on her mind lately as she reflected on her life. Ethan considered carefully. "Small ones, maybe? I wish I could have met my mother again as an adult, told her about the life I built. I wish we could have had more time before responsibilities got in the way. But regrets about us, about the choices we made, not a single one. You?" "I regret the years I lost with Gerald," Elena said slowly. "Not because I miss him, but because those were years I could have spent living instead of just surviving. But I suppose those years taught me lessons I needed to learn. They taught me my own strength. They taught me the difference between a relationship built on fear and one built on love. They brought you to me," Ethan said. "So while I hate what you suffered, I cannot regret the path that led us to each other." Elena smiled. "No, I cannot regret that either." They sat together as the sun set, painting the sky in brilliant shades of orange and purple. The ranch stretched out before them, everything they had built together. In the distance, they could hear Samuel calling to one of the hands, could see Grace's children playing by the barn, could smell the sweet scent of hay and horses and home. Elena thought about the young woman she had been, walking out of Gerald's house with nothing but a carpet bag and $17. She thought about the terror and uncertainty, the judgment and isolation. She thought about Ethan appearing like a blessing she had not known to ask for, offering kindness and respect when the world offered only condemnation. "Leaving took more courage than staying," she murmured, repeating the words that had changed her life. "What was that?" Ethan asked. "Just remembering," Elena said. "Remembering how we got here, how much we overcame. Feeling grateful for all of it, even the hard parts." "Especially the hard parts," Ethan said. "They showed us what we are capable of. They taught us to value what we have." As darkness fell and stars began to emerge, Elena leaned her head on Ethan's shoulder, feeling the steady rise and fall of his breathing. This was what she had been searching for all those years ago without knowing it. Peace, partnership, a love that lifted rather than crushed. She had been shunned for leaving her abusive husband, but she had found something infinitely more valuable than social approval. She had found herself, her strength, her voice. And she had found a man who saw all of that and loved her not despite it, but because of it. The world had told her that leaving was cowardice, that a good woman endured no matter what. But Elena had learned a different truth. Sometimes the bravest thing you could do was save yourself. Sometimes courage looked like walking away from everything you knew into an uncertain future. Sometimes love meant choosing yourself first, so you could be whole enough to genuinely love and be loved by someone else. As she sat there on the porch with Ethan, surrounded by the life they had built through determination and faith and sheer stubborn will, Elena knew with absolute certainty that every difficult step had been worth it. She had walked through fire and emerged not destroyed, but forged into something stronger, clearer, truer. The story that had begun with a bruised woman fleeing in shame had become a tale of triumph, of love, of a life fully and freely lived. And if Elena could go back and tell that terrified younger version of herself anything, it would be this: the courage to leave is the courage that changes everything. It is the courage that saves your life, that opens doors you did not know existed, that leads you to places and people you could never have imagined. She had been shunned for leaving, but she had gained the world. And that, Elena thought, as she held her husband's hand under the vast California sky, was the best trade she had ever made.